Hey guys, it's Villain Fury, and if you watched my recent video, The Future of Marvel Champions, I said we need Standard 3, and Fantasy Flight Games answered immediately. So last week we had the preview article come out for Age of Apocalypse, and lo and behold, Standard 3 is part of it. Was I responsible? I'd like to think so, but I absolutely wasn't. This was, of course, designed, months and months ago, and just happened to coincide. I did sort of predict / say we needed it at Wave 8, which is what we're, soon entering, and I'm still really excited and I want to play against it. Now, the main difference here is that it replaces Shadow of the Past with this new mechanic on this environment card called Pursued by the Past, and all of the rest of the encounter set kind of interacts with it. It's a bit more complicated than Standard 1 and Standard 2, but it's definitely lower difficulty than Standard 2, which is kind of a good thing overall. Although, Standard 2 has its place, I'm not its biggest fan, but Standard 3 is looking very, very good. So let's get into it. So really, the difference here between Pursued by the Past and Shadow of the Past is that Shadow of the Past would just randomly bring in your Nemesis set. It could be on turn 1, and for some characters, that was almost an instant loss, especially against some harder villains, It's just unbelievably brutal. But a lot of the time, you would just never see your Nemesis. It would never come up as your encounter card. I was talking to Nelson recently on our podcast. I think he said he thinks he gets Shadow of the Past about 20% of the time. For me, I feel like I get it at maybe 25%, but it's definitely in that ballpark. It's not 50%. It's not 40%, honestly. It's not that often. And it will depend on how you play. Some characters win faster. The more turns that go on, the higher the chance of getting Shadow of the Past, and so on. But it is, nonetheless, kind of random. It can just end the game out of nowhere, or you won't even see it. And people like Nemesis sets. They're interesting. And Pursued by the Past tries to fix this. Pursued by the Past is a permanent setup card, so it'll always be there from the start of the game. And the encounter cards in Standard 3, add counters onto it. So you'll gradually build up a few counters, and then your Nemesis, set will enter play. But that's not strictly just how it works. So let's look at it in a bit more detail. So after you place a pursuit counter on Pursued by the Past, you count the number of counters there, and if there's more than the set amount, you remove them all and you flip the card. And that's when your Nemesis set comes into play. But it's a little bit more complicated than that, because if your Nemesis set has already entered play once before, it won't work like Shadow of the Past. Instead, it will just find your Nemesis minion and bring them out. So the first time it triggers, your Nemesis set enters play just like normal, just like Shadow of the Past. And then every time after that, it's just, the Nemesis minion. So you're going to get to see a lot of the minion, which means all the encounter cards that only work with Nemesis minions are more likely to actually find the right minion to interact with. And you're just going to get a lot more interaction with them yourself. And it's going to be pretty fun. Now, the caveat here is, it has a different amount of counters per player count. And actually, they have tried to balance it, it looks like, to be kind to solo players. Or maybe I should say harsh to multiplayer. So for solo play, you need 4 counters on this thing, which we'll see how quickly they gather up as we look through the cards. But it's probably going to take most of one deck cycle unless you get pretty unlucky, in my opinion. Just based on what we've seen so far, it could go a lot quicker. There is one nasty card which adds on a lot of counters here. But then in 2-player, it goes up to 5. So now you're seeing double the boost cards, double the encounter cards, but it's only increased by, 25%. What this means is, in 2-player, this is a lot harsher than solo play. You're going to be seeing Nemesis sets and minions a lot more than in solo play. This increases for 3-player, which only goes up to 6, and yet you're getting 3 times the amount of boost and encounter cards and so on and so forth for 4-player. Why is this? Well, traditionally, I think of the game as slightly easier at 4-player, and I think this is kind of a balancing mechanic. I think, basically the more players there are, the easier it is, because you have more people, so you've got more versatility, more people that can respond to different things. If someone's going to get defeated, someone else is probably going to be able to block for them somehow. The threat threshold on the main scheme increases, which means you are less likely to just lose to a random advance. In fact, I'd say it's very unlikely. Normally, if you lose in 4-player, it's because of, kind of a war of attrition. A lot of things will build up faster than you can deal with them, and then you're in trouble. Whereas in solo play, sometimes advance happens and, oh, I lost the game. There was nothing I could do about it. So this to me looks like kind of a balancing act to try and make things harder when there's more people, and not so bad when there are less people. And yeah, I quite like what they have done here in general. I like this philosophy. So let's look at the rest of the encounter set. First up, we have the new advance, which is Dark Designs, which has a very similar name to the standard 2 card, Dark Dealings. So I wonder if we ever get a standard 4, if it's going to be Dark something else. But yeah, Dark Designs, when revealed, place 1 pursuit counter on Pursued by the Past. Then if it has counters on it, the villain schemes. what does this mean? If I add one counter to Pursued by the Past, how could there not be any counters on it? Well, if you add the final counter to it, all the counters are wiped off and your nemesis kind of comes in. So then if that happens, Dark Design says, you know what, I'll give you a pass. So either the villain schemes or your nemesis enters play. And I like this design, if the bad thing happens, then what was otherwise also going to happen doesn't happen. They kind of, say, you don't need an encounter card if your nemesis is in play. That is kind of the encounter card. So it's like Advance, but it might not scheme. For solo play, I think in some ways this might be a good thing because Advance can just end the game. And in solo play, where you need 4 counters, this means there is roughly, a 75% chance that, yeah, Advance goes ahead, but there's a 25% chance that your nemesis kind of enters play instead. And nemesis sets are very bad, but they don't instantly end the game at least, so there is some advantage. But the scary thing here is the boost effect, which is after the activation resolves, place 1 pursuit counter on Pursued by the Past. This does not give you a break if that brings your nemesis minion in. In fact, it will probably attack you during the villain attacks, sort of part of the villain phase. So the boost effect on this is terrifying if you get it at the wrong time. But the when revealed is kind of, I would say, about the same as Advance. Maybe slightly scarier in multiplayer when you're going to keep bringing all these nemesis sets for everyone. But you can kind of, it's different. I do think overall it's starting to point towards Standard 3 being harder than Standard 1, even though, the announcement says they're kind of similar. But it's definitely not as hard as Standard 2. So, yeah, really interesting card. We'll have to see how this works out. We'll have to see how many more encounter cards have a boost effect that puts a counter on. There's at least one more. We're going to get to it soon, but we don't know the last 2 cards, which could have, honestly, quite a dramatic impact. So the next card we've got is the new version of Assault. This is called Sinister Strike. It is not, in any way parody of the names of the other cards here. And it does not have Mr. Sinister on it, which I'm still disappointed with, but, I respect it. It's treachery like normal, and it's kind of similar. If you're alter ego, you'll surge, but if you're in hero form, you'll get attacked. But just like Dark Designs, it's going to add a counter onto Pursued by the Past. And it will also give you a break if your nemesis set or minion comes into play, just like that. So when revealed in hero form, place 1 pursuit counter on Pursued by the Past. Then if it has any counters on it, which you only will if it hasn't brought in your nemesis, the villain will then attack. And what's really interesting here that is different to Assault is that it has a boost icon. And this was kind of set the same with Dark Designs. It had a star, whereas Advance did not. So they're a little bit more difficult in that respect, just upping the damage or, having a boost effect. But overall, it's not going to be too different, except that one time out of however many times when, oh, hello, Nemesis. So pretty interesting. Then we have what I'm calling the new Shadow of the Past. But it is not Shadow of the Past because we have Pursued by the Past. But there's a new card in Standard 3, which is definitely a lot meaner than the others, and that is Evil Alliance. This card says, when revealed, each Nemesis minion in play activates against you. Now, if there are multiple, which there could be in multiplayer with this kind of, low scaling counters kind of thing going on, you could have multiple Nemesis minions in play, and then they're all going to hit you. That is pretty scary. But if none activated that way, put 3 counters on Pursued by the Past. What that means is you're almost certainly, not almost certainly, but very likely to have your nemesis, enter play right then and there. This is almost like Shadow of the Past in terms of, how quickly it can trigger it. If you have even one counter on it in, solo play, your nemesis is going to come in and hurt you. Now, there is some sort of caveat here. If in solo play, I'm just using solo play as an example because it's sort of an easier one, and I think maybe the majority of what people play here. But if you have 3 or 4 counters on there and an Evil Alliance comes up, it's actually not that bad. It's actually, in some ways, just the same as getting, the new Advance or the new Assault, Dark Designs or Sinister Strike, because it's only going to add 1 counter on realistically. You will add 3 counters on, but since you have gone over the set amount, you wipe all the counters off. So it's going to hit harder in certain situations than others, but nonetheless, it is a kind of a very quick burst of counters, and your nemesis is going to come in pretty soon after that. So just like Dark Designs, Evil Alliance has that boost effect that puts a counter on, but unlike the normal Shadow of the Past, which is kind of its equivalent in my opinion, it doesn't have those 2 boost icons. So the villain won't hit you as hard, but yeah, your nemesis is getting, a big boost into entering play here. So very scary card. I think people are going to be trying to avoid this one. They're going to, when this comes up, this is the kind of card you go, oh no. but it's kind of fun too. So we'll have to see how this works out. And that really brings us to all the cards we know about. We are missing the 7th and 8th card in the set because it has one extra because of that environment compared to normal standard. And the missing equivalents, which we haven't seen, are Gang Up and Caught Off Guard. I don't know if they're going to go for, kind of, new versions of these cards that, interact with counters somehow, or if they're just going to be like, hey, you know what, we'll do something new. I kind of feel like with the way they want Nemesis minions in, they might still want something like Gang Up that, makes minions attack. Standard 2 has something like that. And, I think being able to affect upgrades is, getting rid of upgrades and supports is probably a good thing for the villain to be able to do. So I do imagine I'll keep something like that. What I would like to see is with Caught Off Guard, or the new equivalent, that I would like it to make you have to discard upgrades and supports up to a certain cost. Not the most expensive one, because I think that is, you can build around it and play around it, but I think it's going to shut down a lot of fun strategies, because if you play your best card and it just gets removed randomly, maybe you just feel like, maybe I shouldn't just play that card in the first place, and I think that is sad. But if you had to discard cards to a cost up to 4, you could, discard two cost upgrades or something like that. But nonetheless, I hope it's kind of moderated and they don't just go to, what a lot of new cards do, that is the most expensive card you control. But we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to see what they do with counters and if these will have boost effects or, boost icons. But right now it's looking like lots more boost effects, lots more seeing your Nemesis, but not seeing it turn 1. This is what we have so far. 2 Dark Designs, 2 Sinister Strikes, 1 Evil Alliance. That is all we know. There could be multiple Evil Alliance, but I would be extraordinarily surprised if there was. I know that there are 2 of the Dark Designs and Sinister Strikes by counting the card numbers at the bottom. But long story short, this is what we have so far. And so I honestly think this is quite a bit more difficult than Standard 1, except if you get really unlucky with Shadow of the Past very early on in Standard 1. So it's a bit more forgiving of those very unlucky scenarios, but then it is a bit harsher because it is going to bring your Nemesis in. There's much higher chance of it entering play, I think, with these effects than, the Standard 1. So you are probably going to see it and have to deal with it, and then they might bring it in again. But overall, you're going to be able to plan around that a bit because you will see the counters increase, unless Evil Alliance comes along. So yeah, there's some pros and cons there. I think it's pretty interesting. We'll have to see how that works out overall. I'm very excited for it though. I think Nemesis minions and sets are very underutilized, and I'm excited to see more of them. Now, the final question, the burning question is, will there be an expert free? Well, I think probably, almost certainly, but I don't know if there is an expert free. It will be kind of at the back of the whole expansion, as kind of an extra that, hey, if you want to play an expert, you can include these as well. Now, I don't know that for sure. It could be any way around, but I think it would be very strange not to have a standard free and not have a new expert free as well, especially because it seems like they're trying to go for less swingy results, not just randomly hit your Shadow of the Past turn 1. Under Fire is another one of those really mean cards, which I think they might want to soften. They might want to make the new equivalent of Exhaustion and Master Plan slightly worse, but Under Fire, slightly less bad. That'd be my guess if they do it, but we'll have to see. But that brings us to the end of the video. Hopefully this has made the, standard free make sense. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this. I'm really looking forward to it. Phoenix definitely won't be looking forward to it, seeing her Nemesis probably more often. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. If you've enjoyed this video, if you want to see more, please add a pursuit counter to the subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.